Hello and welcome back to the University of Track and Field Team of the Decade, Team of the 2010s. I'm Kevin McGurk. Thank you so much for rejoining us again this week. Last week we looked at the middle distance, and today we're going to be moving on to the long distance. Very excited. We'll probably see some names that we've seen already. Not to give too much away, but give you a little hint of what might come. Now I'll bring in my partner and co-host, Matt Barber, former coach and athlete at UD and the 400-meter selection for the Team of the Decade. How are you doing today?
Doing all right.
Well, last week we looked at the middle distance. We saw the second of our two clean sweepers, Greg Kamarunas, as well as Anna Wilgenbush and Megan Darris. And so, as we get a look at the long distance today, what are your most looking forward to today as far as the long distance?
Long distance, you get a lot more interplay between cross country and track, and so in my mind, I'm going to have more data points to compare some of these athletes, but it's also the idyllic, perfect cross country race, and so you typically get faster times. So some of this is pretty interesting, I guess.
And so you mentioned the idyllic cross country race. I know a lot of cross-country runners who also do track don't really like track because of the running in circles part of track and field.
Well, it's different athlete to athlete. Some of them like exploring the woods and getting lost in the race and just beating the person in front of them. And so when they're on the track, they have to count 25 laps to get a little annoyed. Then you get someone like Jack Grubner. He loves the split. You get to count and see if you're on pace for your PR. You get to see if you're on pace to break that next record you're looking for. Because the coach sees you every single lap.
And how much does the flat ground versus the hills contribute to the idyllic race for cross country?
Oh, it speeds you up a ton. Granted, if the wind is really bad on a track, it's way worse on a track than it is in a cross country meet because every single straightaway you hit it. So if it's a 5K, you hit it 12 times in the face. And I've seen it at like McMurray in West Texas, kind of. It can just shoot your legs like within the first mile.
All right, well, without further delay, we move on to our first pick of the long distance Team of the Decade, the men's 5,000 meter run. Alex Bukaty. Alex Bukaty is our selection for the 5K. Alex Bukaty, as you see in the 5,000 meter run, a best time of 16 minutes, 2.46 seconds. The second fastest UD 5,000 meter of all time. And he ran the best time at the Incarnate Word Relays, which, as you can see in the footnote, he was neck and neck with Sal Pedromo from Trinity, who ended up winning the 5K and steeplechase as a senior at the SEAC Championships. And when we were considering the 5K, our other possible selection was Ryan McInerney, but that race was the one that ultimately for you wanted Alex instead of Ryan on this team.
Well, so we've given a shout out to Ryan in the 1500 coming in behind Greg, and I'm going to give another shout out to Ryan McInerney here. He had a stellar career. I think he medaled in the 15 every single year in the SCAC. In the 15, granted, in the 5K, I like his best couple of races ever I've seen were when he went up to the 5K in track. I know at Walt Disney World when we went 2015, I saw him run the perfect race. He held off coasting on the guy who was front running until about 500, 600 meters to go, because guess what? Ryan knows he's faster. Between the 15, the 8, and the 4x4, he knows he's faster, and he outkicked the guy. He ran a 16:07, and that's close to Alex's race here. But I think Alex gets the nod. Even though he only ran one season, if we're talking in the decade, 2010 counts. And Sal Perdomo, he tied in that race, right? They came at the same time. And, I mean, it wasn't a race where everyone ran their PR. It wasn't some outlandish number for Alex, even though it was his PR. If you look, he was traditionally a low 17s guy. That was really his best race. But Sal's best race was consistently in the low 15s. And you see that it wasn't just an obvious PR for every single other runner in that race. And Alex came up to the occasion and competed with a guy that was on national leaderboards. That was a SCAC champion. And I would have loved to see more years out of Alex. I think in the decade, if I needed a guy to go and try and win the 5K for us in conference, or picked Alex.
Well, we move on to the theoretical data now for Alex Bukaty. Here are Alex Bukaty's 5K numbers for the decade. Theoretically, Alex Bukaty's 16 minutes, 2.46 seconds would win 7 times in the 28 years of the SCAC, 702 gold, silver, bronze in the SCAC history, only 2 bronze medals in the 2010 decade, however, 0, 0, and 2, with some other scoring finishes, a couple of 4th places, a 5th and a 6th place. Average points scored, 2.3, with his median result of a 5th, 6th place, so 1.5 points, and his most frequent result is a tie of 3rd and 4th for 5 points. And so as we look at the theoretical data, not the strongest on the team, only 2.3 point average, but as you mentioned, he only ran 1 year, and his PR was a pretty great race. How much do you think his theoretical numbers would have improved? As you mentioned, Sal ran in the 15s. Do you think that's a number that Alex over 4 years could have gotten to?
I don't know about quite as low as Sal got. Sal was very, very athletic, and you saw his steeplechase PRs, but there's no reason Alex couldn't have become a consistent, at least high 15-minute 5K guy. Especially with more years, more mileage under his belt. He was quite the talent.
And so I'll take a quick look at some of the other information on Alex Bukaty, and for that matter, Greg Pivarunas, as I promised last week. So both of these athletes were athletes that did not get to compete in the SCAC during their time at UD, as Greg graduated in 2010 and Alex only competed in 2010. As you can see, Greg Pivarunas has the 4th best finish in the decade, 94th in the 1500 in 2010, 4th best UD rank in the 2010s, and he has 2 event wins tied with, well, we'll let you read that part for yourself. Alex, on the other hand, he also has the note of being the highest 5K runner in the decade, as he competed 6 times in the 5K in 2010. That is the most by anyone, men or women, in the 5K in a single season. And so as we prepare to move on to the women's 5K, tell us a little bit about Alex.
He really seemed to be a specialist. I know he came in, he was a freshman in cross country. It's a shame. I was on the cross country team, so I didn't maybe know him as well as I could have. But I know Clinton, who ended up doing 4 years, of track, competed with Greg and Alex, those cross country teams with Megan, and I just would have loved to see a couple more years out of Alex.
All right, so we'll move on to the women's 5K selection, and the 5,000 meter selection for the team of the decade is Anna Wilgenbusch. Well, we have our next repeat selection of the team of the decade. We have had Prince, Katie McIntyre, Greg Pivarunas, and now Anna Wilgenbusch, our 4th multi-pick.
Yeah.
And as we take a look at her data, Anna Wilgenbusch ran a best time of 18 minutes, 54 seconds, 0.61 in the 5,000 meter, the UD record holder for the 5,000 meter run. The first woman at UD to run under 19 minutes in the 5K, and she has 2 of the top 5 times all time. I should say 2 of the top 5 times in the decade. And so those were numbers she broke as a freshman. She skipped her sophomore year because she was in Rome at the time doing the semester abroad. And so, as we've seen from her in cross country and in track, there really is no surprise that she made the 5K as well as the 15.
No. Her only eligible season for the team of the decade for track is her freshman year, and she made it 2 events. As she continues to grow, as we saw in cross country that next season, I expect if we do another decade team 10 years from now, she might just sweep the distance events.
What about the mid-distance events?
I'll give her the 15 again. I don't think the 800.
All right, well, we'll now look at her theoretical data. Hannah Wilgenbush, 7 of 28 years, her time of 18:54.61, wins the SCAC 7, 6, and 2 gold, silver, bronze, and 1, 2, and 1 in the decade gold, silver, bronze for a 4.7 point average. Her most frequent result is 5th place. Her median score is 4th place. And so the better of her 2 events, and we'll talk to her a little bit later on, do you think that this is, that with the data that we've seen, that the 5K is something that should be her best event?
No, I think it's a 10K. As the distance goes up, she just gets better. She gets better and better and better. Her aerobic engine, so far from what I've seen, is limitless. I think she can excel in the 5 and the 10, until she graduates.
And so some of the additional data, as we'll show you on her screen, Anna does have a medal 1 in the SCAC, a silver in the 10K. She is one of 4 athletes on this team who is not picked for an event that they want a medal in. Everyone else who has been picked, if they want a medal, has been picked in that event. Now you have some athletes who have won multiple medals and they did not necessarily get picked in all of the events that they want a medal in. But they've always been, except for 4 athletes, they've always had at least one event that they medaled in that they were picked for. Anna is not one of them. Just interesting note.
Yeah.
And we'll see a lot more of that when we get to the field events, athletes who were not picked for events that they won medals in. Her 10K time is also to go to your point from a minute ago, is the 4th fastest all time at UD. And in 2019, she ran every middle distance and long distance race. She ran the 8, the 15, the 10, and the 5Ks.
And we put her in the 4x4.
And we put her in the 4x4. And also, side note, she was an All-American in cross country. So
Yeah, small side note. First All-American in school history.
Small side note. So Hannah Wilgenbush, our 5K selection, as that will do it for our 5K picks. And now on to the 10K. First, the men's 10K all-decade selection is Javier Sequeira. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Sequeira.
Yeah.
Our 10K selection. So Javier, with a best time all time of 35 minutes, 10.50 seconds, the UD record holder in the 10K, won a bronze medal in 2014 and has the 2 top 10K times of all time. And you can see some of those other footnotes at the bottom. Missed also having the 5th best time all time by 0.04 of a second. And so track and field is a sport that can quite literally come down to the blink of an eye, the length of a fingernail. 0.04 of a second from having 3 of the top 5 times. Just put it into perspective for us, if you would. 0.04 of a second in a 10K.
That's close at a 100-meter dash, which lasts 10 seconds. For an event that lasts 35 or 36 minutes. Yeah, it's really close.
So Javier, 10K selection.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about Javier. You coached him for a couple of years.
Teammate for a year. Javier is a pretty easy choice as our 10K pick. I think he was the third fastest 5K runner as well, 16:13 as a freshman. He could have been even better. He ran all 4 years. He had a knee injury that kept him out. I think there was one track season where he only ran one event, coming off of a summer, putting in mileage coming into the school year. He had a knee injury. I don't remember what it was. But as a freshman, we saw really high highs with his 10K and 5K potential. And he pretty similar to Anna Wilgenbush we just mentioned. As the mileage goes up and as the race is longer, he's better. And is an exceptional 10K guy. He also has the mental strength for it. Running 25 laps can get really taxing. It's like, oh, it's only 36 minutes. You can pay attention for 36 minutes. Like, yes, but it can also be, it can seem like hours when you're out there. And he was hyper competitive. I never doubted for an instant that he was going to let up.
And so we look at his theoretical data now. In 28 years, his PR of 35:10:50 wins 2 times in the history of the SCAC, 2, 3, 2, gold, silver, bronze in the decades 0, 1, and 2. He was 7th, 3rd, and 7th in his 3 10K finishes, 13, 14, and 16. Average 2.6 points scored in the 10K with a median score of between 5th and 7th place, so essentially 6th place. And unfortunately, he is the first athlete on this list that has a non-scoring most frequent result, as he only has 5 actual scoring results, except for the 2 bronze medals. None of his results were super consistent, as his finishes were all over the place. He had his theoretical finishes between 2nd and 12th, and except for those 2 bronze medals, he didn't have the same finish twice. So looking at all the data, what does this tell you?
He had a lot of room to grow. He was our best 10K runner, and obviously wasn't as competitive as maybe some of our other events historically, but he definitely had a lot of room to grow and showed it as a freshman. Got back to it, fought through the injury, and got back to some of our best times ever. But had he had a couple more years injury-free, he could have broken into a more consistent medalist position like he showed as a freshman when he did medal.
All right, so that is Javier
Sequeira,
our 10K selection for the men's all-decade team, and now the women's selection for the 10K is... Claire Myers. Claire Myers, the pick for the 2010 Team of the Decade, and her best time, 41:2:29 in the 10K, the UD record holder. 6th place at the 2014 championships, and you can see those footnotes at the bottom there. And so Claire was the pick that we chose over Anna Wilgenbush for the 10K. We had a little bit of a debate about the 10K selection, but ultimately we went with Claire. And so, what about Claire? She only actually ran that race the one time, the 10K, and set the record. So what about Claire was able to get her this spot?
Well, a little bit of background. I think she was the #1 runner on the cross-country team for 3 years, maybe. She, at the time of her 10K, this 10K time, she was the school record holder in the cross-country 6K. She was all-region in cross-country in the Southeast NCAA. And she ran an exceptional 10K. She got better as the distance went up. Theoretically, looking at how much better Anna got as a sophomore, could Anna have taken this spot? Yes, but Anna took that leap as a sophomore. The 2019 cross-country season is 2020 track and wouldn't qualify quite for the all-decade team 2010 to 2019. So Claire eked out a victory here by Anna being 1 year too young. But Claire is has a very deserving spot here as a 10K. As a freshman, Anna Wilgenbush, I don't think could have beaten Claire in the 10K.
And so we'll look at the theoretical data for Claire Myers, her time of 41:02:29. Wins 4 times in 28 years, 4, 2, and 6. Gold, silver, bronze all time, which is good for 12 out of 28 medals. 0, 1, and 4. Gold, silver, bronze in the decade. Average score of 4.9, with her median result of 3rd and 4th, and her most frequent result of 3rd. So, solid runner. From a competitive standpoint, what did the numbers tell you?
That she was consistently in that, like I said, from cross country, she was an all-region runner. She was never quite an all-national level runner the way Anna was, with a sweep of the medals. But every other year, you would expect to see Claire as a medalist in the conference, almost. You know, not in the decade, it almost lines up too. It's about, what, 5 out of 10. So it just verifies what I saw. I mean, worthy of note here, we're talking about Anna versus Claire. The second fastest 10K of the decade was Ruth Fritz, who was a teammate of Claire's for a couple of years there in between. You know, obviously both of them a few years before Anna. But, yeah, good runner.
All right, so we'll take about 2 or 3 minutes here to take a look at our first purely speculative comparison, our first purely speculative athlete versus athlete challenge.
Okay.
And so we ran some projected numbers. There are, certain track and field calculators. You can project certain times from other times, as we'll get to more later towards the end of the reveal selections. So, according to the calculators, both Anna and Claire could have had faster 10K times projected based off of their 5K times.
Yep.
And so for their, only using the track data, only using the track 5Ks, Claire would have had a projected 10K time of 40:19, and Anna would have had a projected 10K time of 39:18. And we won't detail each of the marks, but as you can see there, 17 medals versus 22, and very top-heavy for Anna with those 16 golds. And the biggest difference I see is the points average difference. Claire's bump is still there. It goes up a few ticks. But Anna's goes from 3.7 average to 8.2. And so, again, this is purely speculative, but do you think that these are times that both of them were capable of achieving?
Yeah, absolutely. Those calculators are there for a reason. It's not a perfect translation, especially with distance athletes. It's saying they're capable of doing the same thing. You would obviously have to change certain training dynamics, but both of them trained a little bit more as long distance runners, even though Anna did the 15 with some consistency. It's just that neither of them ran the 10K very frequently. They don't have as many marks in it, obviously, like you mentioned. And so you aren't always going to see the 10K line up, because it takes so much out of the energy of a runner that they're not going to run it every week. So given more marks and more bites at the apple, whatever, yes, I think both of them could reach those times.
And so we would have had, as you mentioned, for the 2020s team of the decade, 10 years from now, it's pretty obvious that Anna's going to run away with that 10K.
Hey, unless Coach Nick starts recruiting regular All-Americans like he's done in his first year with Anna, she is far and away the best distance runner we've had so far. And so right now she's a front runner for the next decade team.
All right, so okay.
No, that's it.
Okay. Well, quick, show you on screen again the numbers of Anna versus Claire, their medals and statistical outcomes, their most frequent results, their average results. And so we come to the close of the long distance, and your final thoughts on the long distance selections.
It's kind of cool seeing the distance runners. I know I said mid distance was maybe my most exciting, maybe relays are my most exciting, but actually looking at the 5K, 10K guys, I get to reflect back on more of the cross country teams as well, and some of the varying data points. It's really fun, especially because these are the events that adults run. Any parent who might watch this, you run 5K times on occasion. You take your kids out for like a turkey trot, and it's probably easier for more people to put into perspective the strength of these athletes. It's impressive. Yeah, these are some good runners. I'll make sure they know they're on the list.
Well, we'll show you on screen the picks. Alex Bukaty and Javier Sequeira and Anna Wilgenbush and Claire Myers are 5 and 10K selections. They're now going to interview our UD women's track and field all-decade selections for the 1500 meter and the 5K. All-American in cross country, Anna Wilgenbush. Anna, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so how does it feel to be selected to the UD track and field all-decade team, not once, but twice?
I think it kind of just reflects like the community here, that it's just awesome to be part of such like a strong team across the decade. Like it's not just my year, my team, we're really drawing from everywhere.
And so, what's the most special thing about being part of UD track and field?
One thing that I really appreciate about being on the UD team is just the team culture, that you can really tell how incredibly supportive the team is, whether that's like in practices, cheering each other on, or just like as we're traveling to and from a meet. It's a very uplifting community, which I think is something really special. You don't find that everywhere.
And so, what do you attribute your success in track to?
I think several things have gotten me where I am. Definitely good coaching really makes a difference. That's something I realized coming to college, how much a difference good coaching can make. I don't know. I'd have to thank the team as well, just for being that supportive backbone on the way.
And so you had a big year as a freshman. You set the 5K record, and you got a silver in the 10K as a freshman. Is that a spot you expected to be in so early in your collegiate track career?
Definitely not, but it was a really cool stride to take after cross country. I really kind of felt myself coming into my stride there in track, building off of the cross country season. So yeah, I think that was really reflected in my times, but also just like my ability to race. I felt like was really solidified by track freshman year.
And I'll go ahead and echo that. By the end of your freshman year, the 10K was your last race your freshman year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she made it for the 15 and the 5K, but that was one of the most exciting races I'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a 6-mile race, the 10K, and for the last 2 miles, we were fighting off one other girl for that second place finish. So it was 2 miles of like pure adrenaline. It was, and just to echo that point, you really learned how to race freshman year.
And so that was freshman year. You have 2 more years left, junior, senior year. Are we expecting the best to still come?
Absolutely, yeah. I really hope so. I think building off of last fall cross country season, I'm just so excited to be able to race again. I think there's going to be a lot of like pent up energy and excitement that is going to play out when we finally get to hit the track again.
All right, so before we let you go, I just want to throw some of the theoretical data that we've compiled together, as we've already mentioned at this point, but we'll show it to you again. So your 2 selections, the 1500 and the 5K, PR 5:06:35 in the 15 and 18:54:61 in the 5K. Those times in the SCAC would win the conference all time out of 28 years, would win once. Again, unfortunately, sadly, it doesn't ever actually win in the decade, but it would get a gold, a silver, and 2 bronze all time. And average, the median finish is 6th, that's a combination of 6th and 7th place. In the 5K, the better of the 2 events, your 1854 wins 7 times, once in the 2010s, 15 total years at medals, 7 gold, 6 silvers, 2 bronze, 4 medals in the decade, a gold, 2 silvers, a bronze, average points scored 4.7, median result of 4th, and the most frequent result of 5th place. And so, as we've looked at a lot of data at this point, so like it's a very data-driven project, and so
Track has numbers.
track is just a very number-driven
Yeah.
sport. So, I don't know. What's your reaction to actually hearing all of those numbers?
Just makes me excited for this coming season. Yeah, I'm excited to compete again, for sure.
So, if you were out of the 2 events, the 15 and the 5K, if you were only picking one of them, which would you pick?
I think the 5K is really where I find the most thrill in competing, especially just being more of a cross-country person in general. I really love kind of a longer distance, a longer race to play out and be able to kind of compete there. Yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Anna, for joining us today.
Of course, thank you.
And we will conclude now the Team of the Decade for long distance picks. I'm Kevin McGurk here with,
Matt Barber.
and we'll see you next week.